My name is Peter Pilling. I'm the Director of Athletics at Columbia University. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm joined tonight by a number of our student athletes. I believe we have over 20 student athletes with us. We also have some head coaches and administrators, individuals that run our Sports Performance Center and our Center for Success. Quick David Stern story for you. When I was interviewing for the athletic director position at Columbia, I had one of the interviews in the trustee room. If you've ever been in the trustee room at Columbia in the Low Library, there's a giant portrait of David Stern in there. I Snapchatted a picture of David Stern's portrait to my children, and when I returned home following my interview, they wanted to know nothing about how my interview went. They just want to know what David Stern was like and how he was. And I told them,
put it in that interview. I think they moved it to the basement after I left.
No, it's still there. I told them I just saw his portrait, but someday I would be fortunate enough to meet him. So, David, thank you for inviting Columbia to be participating on this. It's interesting. We've had a lot of discussions within our athletic department about starting an incubator around analytics. And I think this group will share a lot of information about wearables and technology as it applies to sports technology and also the quantified athlete. So David, I'll turn it back over to you with this group, but on behalf of Columbia Athletics, we're grateful to be here. We have some amazing student athletes that represent our university in 31 sports. We won the national championship in fencing, also in women's archery, and we're excited about the future of a lot of our programs. So David, thank you.
Thank you. Go Lions. Okay. Next, sitting to my left, it is beyond wearables. It's really the use of digital information to make decision in sports, and it's going to ultimately be, well beyond that. But we're going to lead the way with sports. Hans Schroeder is the Senior Vice President of everything at the NFL, media, revenue, strategy, and development, okay? He works on overall media strategy, negotiating key media rights, and digital media business development, as well as overseeing revenue for the league's owned and operated media assets, including NFL Network and ad sales across all platforms. But he also oversees all the development of wearables in the NFL and other kinds of information that's being generated by what comes into contact with players. Let's see, next. That's you, okay. Joe, Bill Besselman. Bill Besselman, I invited him too, is Vice President of Connected Fitness Strategy and Integration for Under Armour. He manages all aspects of their digital strategy development, including, most importantly for our purposes, their recent acquisition of MapMyFitness, MyFitnessPal, and Endomondo into the Under Armour business. And before this, you were with Textronics?
No.
That's, go ahead. Yeah, that's you? Oh, okay, got it confused. Go ahead.
I've been with Under Armour for about 3 years, and before that with
McKinsey. We have a lot of things popped up. There's a fair number of investment bankers on our 3 panels, more Princeton than Columbia graduates. Who knew? Go figure. And and consultants, whether they or either some were at Bain, some were at McKinsey, and it's kind of interesting to know where you guys got lost. Jason Sherwin is co-founder and chief executive officer of Decurvo, a Columbia University-born startup that focuses on brain imaging of high-speed decision-making. And I should mention that Decurvo was among the first Columbia startups to take part in the Columbia Startup Lab, the Columbia University Incubator in Soho, okay? Next, Joe Zachlars.
Good enough.
I skipped one, okay. I skipped one. Where am I?
You're good.
Okay. Is the commercial director for the digital sports at Adidas, or as they say outside of the U.S., Adidas, where he has served in a wide range of roles within the team, including product development, business development, program management, and sales leadership of the company's professional and consumer digital sports products lines. Okay? Next, raise your hand. How am I missing? I did it all, huh? Okay. All right. So let's start talking about, before we get to the companies or we get to this brain stuff that I really don't understand, but I'm going to learn tonight. What is the NFL doing in what fields of information, and where do you think it's going?
Sure. So we are probably doing something a little bit different than the rest of these gentlemen. And if you sort of think about player tracking and athlete and personal performance, there's a whole range of spectrum. I think these guys will talk a lot about the personal fitness level and what they're doing at the athlete training level. What we've really focused on is player tracking in-game is sort of the principal area we're starting with and building out from. And it really devolved from a moment in a game about 7 years ago where at the end of the game, it was the Pittsburgh at Baltimore game, and with under a minute, clock running down, a player caught the ball inside the one, got tackled right on the goal line, and they couldn't tell whether he got in the end zone or not. And so I don't know if I drew the long straw or the short straw, but the next day we had a meeting with the commissioner, and he asked, why can't technology solve that? And so that started us down a path over the last 7 years of really figuring out how we track all the activity on the field. The good news, we've come a long way. The bad news, we are tracking the ball. We can't solve that case yet. But what we are seeing today is we're live across all 256 games. All players in every game are wearing instrumented chips on their shoulder pads that track a number of things about their actual performance on the game that day. And we're starting to unlock a whole world of different and differentiated stats.
What do they track?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The stats are principally
you can tell us.
About, it would be more interesting off the field, but on the field.
I can't get them to give it up. I tried.
But on the field, principally where we're at today is really doing a lot of the XYZ movement. So how fast they're going, where they're going, total distance. So we know last week, the player in the league that ran the most distance across all 16 games ran about 2,100 yards. To put that in context, about 1.5 miles. We know the fastest speeds that players were running were 22 miles an hour. And some of this stuff's new. Last year, we were doing it for the first time, and J.J. Watt was running, and we tagged him on an interception return at about 18, 19 miles an hour, and all of a sudden Twitter blows up because there's no way he's that fast. And so an engineer starts taking his 40 time from the combine, calculating it out, and realizing it is possible for him to hit that speed. But for us, we're at the early stages of this journey and trying to really figure out where and all the use cases are. But if you sort of project out, there's things we're already doing today. If you go to the NFL.com fantasy app, for every play, every player on your team, it'll show if they're on the field or not. So we're tracking that player information. You're starting to see real-time data in a way that is differentiating the sets of data beyond down, yards, distances. We're thinking about how this can fit in a world where you mentioned gaming earlier. Think about your Madden game that you wake up every Monday morning if you have all that data, and all of a sudden you get pushed the 5 new plays that the Bengals ran on Sunday. Hopefully they worked.
And think about if you're in Las Vegas where gambling is legal.
People don't gamble on football, David.
Oh, I see. I'm old enough to have learned that from Pete Rozelle.
But I guess in short, for us today, it's really the beginning of the journey about capturing as much of that data as we can with really a belief, and we'll start with how do we make the experience around our games better for our fans, but ultimately we'll start to see that data bleed into either other parts of our business, including how we make rules, how officials are monitored, how we make the game healthier, a more healthy and safer sport. Those are all things we've seen other leagues around the world already do, and we think there's a lot of opportunity for us ahead as well.
2 questions that are going to be on people's mind, and you're free to answer them or not. One is easy. What is Catapult?
So Catapult is a great company. It's founded by a group of really great guys in Melbourne, Australia, and they were one of the leaders in this space, really starting with the Aussie Rules Football League, and have historically used a GPS-based solution, which these guys can talk about, same GPS that's in your car or otherwise, gives a great sense of general tracking. The level of accuracy isn't quite as refined as we would like to see, sort of for the level of data integrity that we need. But they're great. We certainly, worked with them for a bit and have a lot of respect and a great group of guys.
Are you putting their sensors in your players'
We are not. We
pads?
ultimately ended up partnering with the Zebra Technologies, who's been a great partner for us for the past couple of years and really has led the way and evolved already the experience and what we're able to capture off the field in incredible ways. They're very close to a solution with the ball, which for us would be part of the holy grail solution to get that in-ball element. Getting players to accept a ball change is always an interesting one, based on some of the history there.
Bring back the glowing puck.
But Zebra is a great partner for us, and
I'll let you go with one more question. What are you doing with GE? Is there
GE actually sits a little bit differently, but is a major partnership we announced, really at its core to explore more how we make the game safer. And so there's a bunch of initiatives within that. I'm not as close to all of those, but I do know one of the things we're already starting to do is take this next generation stats data, is what we call it, and figure out how we bleed that into some of the other initiatives we're doing about tracking it with players that maybe had injuries occur. Well, what was the data that went around that injury? Because, some of the things we've seen with other sports, there's actually, going back to the Aussie Rules League, they actually found, which is counterintuitive, where they reduced the amount of substitution, had more fatigued players. It actually reduced injuries because it reduced harder collisions and actually increased scoring. So that's counterintuitive. So once you get the data, it's not always what you think it will reveal, but the data we're collecting ultimately will feed different initiatives, hopefully that being one of them.
Okay. Joe, what's Adidas doing in the wearables business?
Okay, yeah. So Adidas is playing at both the elite professional level, similar to what Hans is talking about, their relationship with Zebra. We have a system that's more similar to the Catapult system, and it's a system that the German national team, for example, used in the run-up to their World Cup win. So on our elite level, we have invented a new smart shirt that is able to bring in biometric data, so capture heart rate information as well as inertial information of speed, distance, and things, and fuse all that up. And it was designed not so much to be, as a first step, a media play to bring fan engagement to the table. It was more as a training tool for the coaching and training staff for lead-ups to games, and with the primary goal of training the right way to maximize training load but minimize injury risk. So our system would involve like an iPad screen that a trainer could be looking at 30 players on the field all at the same time during a training practice and know when it's time to basically start shutting players down in the lead up to a game. So that's what we're doing on the elite level.
That is, to me, that's incredible. I mean, my projection / nightmare, depends what kind of a fan you are, is there's going to be an assistant coach in a cavern someplace, and they're going to phone to the other assistant and say, okay, I've got the screens in front of me, and player X, his oxygen is getting low, his heart rate is too fast, the lactic acid we know is forming in his muscles, and the facial recognition tells me this guy doesn't want to be in the game, get him out. And if you think that that's that far away, you don't know.
Don't forget the brain imaging piece, too.
I'm going to save that for you. You're coming to you last, but you're going to have to explain it all. Okay, Bill, tell me what Under Armour is doing.
So we take a similar approach, but more for the mass consumer market. So we certainly started in a similar kind of place to what Adidas did. We built the shirt that had the integrated wearable that we launched at the NFL Combine in 2010, I believe it was. And that was the first step into wearables for us. We learned a lot from that, but ultimately we learned that the value, frankly, was in the community first and then the wearable. It's about the athlete, not about the thing that they have on their chest that collects the data, which is why we did the acquisitions. Now that we've got that community, we're thinking about where it's the right way for us to engage in wearables, whether that's for the average mom at home, a la Fitbit, or if that's something that's more attuned to working out, which is more natural for us. And so we're exploring where wearables fits into the community.
Do you have a competitor for Fitbit?
I can't really say anything about that, David.
Just tell you
that we're exploring the wearable space,
and
trying to
get so
understand what the commercial opportunities are for Under Armour.
Okay.
So.
And the Fitbits of the world, I don't know either your company, are happy to tell you that they'll monitor your sleep patterns.
They certainly will, and what we think Fitbit's doing is we think they're commoditizing what we think is daily activity. They're commoditizing steps, and we think that ultimately they'll come after working out and fitness. They'll work their way upstream, if you will, and our opportunity is, because we are the best at fitness, we think, is to beat them to the punch and differentiate on workouts and on fitness, and over time commoditize steps so that Fitbit doesn't really have a role in the future. So.
It's interesting because I have a sense that I have this sense that you're going to monetize it. I just
like to monetize, yes, sir.
Yeah, pretty good. Okay, so now before we leave the subject on this, the idea of the elite athlete. So Adidas is responsible because of your technology and your shoes for the Germans winning the World Cup.
Clearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you a plug, but that's but it's interesting because there's a lot of money being, this is not an exclusive panel here. There are lots of people out there that are spending a fortune to get into. We group it wearable, but if you walk down Fifth Avenue and go past the Ralph Lauren shop on 55th, they got a whole window devoted to polo wearables.
That's right, and the OM Signal guys who made this shirt are out there trying to get other folks to build the same shirt.
Okay. Jason, tell us how the brain waves play into this for digital decision making.
Well, so what we're doing is we're backing up to the brain activity that's relevant for how players do the remarkable things they do on the field, whether it's hit a baseball, decide to rush through a line of scrimmage, whatever it is. And so we're using EEG, that's electroencephalography, so that measures electrical activity of the brain, and it's measured through the scalp. So we put a cap on a player, we show them a bunch of pitches on a video game, and they got to recognize different kinds of pitches, fastballs, curveball, sliders, or they got to recognize balls and strikes. And meanwhile, we're making brain measurements on the order of 250 times a second, and we're analyzing that data to find out when they decided that a given pitch was a curveball or wasn't a curveball, or they thought it was a ball or they thought it was a strike. So like I just came back from today from Florida, where we were working with a major league team doing this, last week with a couple other teams in Arizona during their fall instruct leagues.
And so explain how, so you sit a player down at the direction of his team, both of which shall remain nameless, and then by having him with his cap on react to a video game, you are creating data that may affect this player's career because you're going to, in effect, stack the players to see what the reaction time is to a particular player in a particular sport.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is an assessment, level to it, but it's also, because this is something we're measuring here that, is colloquially talked about in baseball, when a guy sees a ball, when he decides it's a strike, when he doesn't decide it's a strike. I mean, because we're measuring something that's so novel in baseball, for example, it has the potential, I think, to be an incredible training tool because, right now, we showed this to a minor league hitting coordinator last April at extended spring training, and he was kind of awestruck that you can measure pitch recognition on a neural level even before a batter moves. Okay, and so right now the kind of cues they look for are a player lunging out over the plate or something, right? But even that lunge right there, that's a physical response that had a neural antecedent to it. And many times you're not even seeing that physical response. So yes, there is an assessment element to this, but there's also a tremendous training potential of it because now you're able to train particular aspects of hitting a baseball that you just didn't have access to before.
And what about other sports?
So I saw you're holding the Wall Street Journal's sports section. There was an interesting article in there by Ben Cohen on the hot hand today. And
Didn't I brought it with me.
I saw that in the pile there.
Didn't I read it at the beginning? I thought I did. It makes the point. Here you go. Talk about sports being important. I only recognize one part. Come on, David. This is about the hot hand. There have been numerous studies done to confirm that a hot hand is not a correct theory. That the idea that if you feel hot and you can shoot, it's ridiculous. You're gonna hit whatever your percentage is, and each one you're doing has the same percentage of what you've done in the past. And just give me the ball, I'm hot, is wrong, except it may be right. And that says a big article in today's Wall Street Journal. Nobel laureates think about the hot hand, okay? Get this, because it's a bias that shapes important decisions. For those academics, the hot hand isn't an isolated basketball experience. It's an accessible example of how beings behave with consequences for almost every industry. They didn't explain that to my satisfaction, but there it was, sports again. Nobel laureates spending their time debating the hot hand.
Yeah, no, I mean, this example, I mean, if you think about, another industry, I mean, we can, bring it back to baseball. You think in baseball, there are batters who say, they feel like some days the baseball looks like a beach ball when it's coming up there, that they know exactly where it's going, and, wherever they swing, they'll hit it. Other days, it looks like a pebble. They just can't put the bat on it. And so, I mean, we haven't looked at the hot hand in basketball, so to speak. And I was trying to work out the numbers in that newspaper article on the way down here today to figure out what he was talking about. And it's really
good. I'm glad. And you're a PhD. Thank God. I wasn't alone in not understanding.
But we've had players tell us. We had a major leaguer tell us last spring training. When he was doing our profiles, he said, anything that slows the game down for us is a huge leg up, right? Because the game is so fast. I mean, these guys are seeing 90 plus, 100 plus in some case mile-an-hour pitches, and it's all over in 400 milliseconds from release to the plate, right? So anything that makes it feel like the game is slowing down to them is important, right? So what does that mean, slowing down? Well, that means that they can predict what's going on in nervous system levels, that they can predict with extreme confidence where the ball's going to go when they're feeling good at the plate. When they're not feeling good at the plate, it just looks like the ball is going every which way. So, I mean, it's not really hot hand. It's more like hot bat. This is we're closest to.
You think we can get a few more seasons out of Peyton Manning with all this technology?
I don't know. It sure would be nice.
I was reading about it. Did you want to answer?
I think to that question, actually, David, we at Under Armour think that in the next 10 years, every world record is going to get broken for exactly these reasons. I mean, just as you were saying, the ability to train on that. Imagine if you could take the best hitters, I hate to say it, but Pete Rose or a Ty Cobb, and actually improve their ability to predict where that pitch is going to be. Or you can take a Peyton Manning, take a Tom Brady, and extend through this improved data, improved training capability. Take these athletes and with all this information, all this data, and the training that will come behind it, we think every record will be broken in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the aspects of make, Tom Brady great, Peyton great when it comes to hitting a passing lane. I mean, another thing, we're mostly working with the major league teams now on the front end of a player's career. These are young players coming in, they're in rookie ball, low A ball, et cetera. But, another aspect of this we see is managing the aging curve on the back end of a career, right? Because it's all about this trade-off between the kinds of cognitive abilities a player gets as they get more experience, right, and the rate at which their physical body will slow down, right? So if they're gaining enough of that cognitive experience to compensate for that physical deficit, and we can measure that and we can tell them how to optimize that balance between the physical side and the mental side, right, then you can extend a player's career, I think, with that kind of stuff.
I mean, think about that. Take all of the great ones and just extend their careers by 1 year longer than it otherwise would have been. It's an extraordinary proposition. On the other hand, we got away from the East German approach to the Olympics because that was illegal. And now we've come up with an entire legal set, or stack if you would, of the most extraordinary data that is going to be used to evaluate, but also to teach, et cetera. But wow, in terms of what athletes will now be, shall we say, subjected to, and the analysis that's going to come in selection, it has an element that's a little bit off-putting, even though I think it's inevitable. Hans?
Well, I think that's right, David, although I think what we've seen, and these guys can comment more on it, is the athletes, and a lot of them are actually self-selecting, and they want this data themselves.
Oh,
a guy
yeah,
like Steve
exactly.
Smith, who is 36 years old, is religious about knowing how he trains and how he optimizes his performance out of season to make sure on Sundays, on game days, he's actually the one, you know, controlling his own fitness, his own, you know, training system to optimize his performance. So, you know, there is a little bit of an element of a top-down, although I think, you know, a lot more is surfacing bottoms up, that it's the guys across the sport. It's not always the superstars. Sometimes it's the guys on the other end of the roster, that they're all really seeing great traction in enhancing their own performance. I don't know if you guys want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you guys want to jump in, but I mean, you know, in terms of our interaction with just even young, especially the young players, I mean, they want to know this kind of information. We haven't had any players just go, you know, no, you're going to mess me up with this or anything. I mean, in fact, we did have one player once, you know, who started doing the pitch recognition profile, and he was like a cross between Keanu Reeves and a Buddhist baseball player. And, you know, this guy sits down at the game, and, you know, we start showing him these pitches in the video game, and he goes, you know, whoa, it's way too fast, right? And you know, I mean, I was like, what's the problem? He's like, it's going to mess me up. I can't do this. We're in spring training, you know, and this guy's getting ready for the season. And so, you know, we talked to him about it, you know. Then he starts playing it, and he starts really getting into it. He ended up being one of the best players at this. And he started the season at AAA and then moved up to the majors in the middle of the season. He's doing great right now. So, you know, I mean, that's the most kind of resistance we've seen from this. And it's, you know, completely turned around in terms of, I mean, he's the guy who actually said anything that slows the game down is a big help for them.
You know, this raises the suggestion about modern technology and medicine. You know, what is laser surgery to improve my eyesight? And what about as we get our DNA and everyone's looking for fast muscle twitch, which is a new phrase to me in the last 8 or 9 years, where people want to see that. Wow, it suggests that there will be other ways to improve against your various tests that players are engaged in.
In some ways, this is just a part of a longer trend, right? The average height in the NBA 35 years ago was not 6'5". It was probably 6'1". And so just through a natural process of finding the best athletes, this is just the next way of making it a little bit easier.
It's lousy if you're a 5'8" commissioner.
It really is.
The delta between, you know, my highlight of my career was when Georgie Murison and Sean Bradley, 7'6" and 7'7", decided it was a good idea on draft night to pat me on the head.
Right. The other thing.
What's up with that, guys?
I think the other thing to remember is, I mean, if anyone in the audience has kids, you know, I have a 5-year-old, and she knows how to use an iPhone far better than I. So in terms of using this technology, while it seems foreign to us older folk, to kids, it's a natural act. Like, they will not just use it, like, it'll be a part of who they are.
And you know that parents are going to start using all of this to say, if Richard could do it for Serena and Venus, I'm going to do it aided with technology. Let's deal with important stuff that's going to lift our family out of whatever problem we might otherwise have.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're starting to see, too, from, you know, kind of the initial validation, working with Big Ten, Ivy League schools, and then, you know, going up to, we actually worked with the Columbia team. We won't take credit for the 3 back-to-back Ivy League championships, though. But, you know, we
what
then
can you
started
do for football?
You can ask Ben Cohen about that when he reports on it. But we
have a lot of moral victories. I don't know how that gets measured.
But, you know, one of the things about this is that, you know, you can potentially measure the perceptual abilities of a of a phenomenal hitter somewhere in another part of the world because he's playing this video game that shows him pitches he's got to recognize and balls and strikes, right? He could be a scrawny Jewish kid like I was playing baseball and basketball, right? His body hasn't filled in yet. But he could have this amazing ability to pick up the movement of a slider before anybody else does. How do we collect that? Well, we'd be collecting that through this video game app.
Holy Moses, because now you're talking about an intercontinental search for the best talent. And now we know that Adidas and Under Armour and Nike and Skechers and One and whatever all know every 10-year-old around the world that's tearing up his or her league as they get ready to approach their professional careers in some number of years. But think about if there's a whole new way to analyze kids, find out who's got this special talent, and then mold them to the sport for which they have special talent.
The last group was talking about how do you get professional athletes to work on the social media. 10-year-old athletes are sharing their stuff on Instagram right now. So, I mean, there's a fuzzy line. I don't know if anyone here has kids who play in AAU basketball, but you know, sometimes you get some sketchy folks involved from an older to a younger perspective. But our kids are actually sharing and using these platforms in ways that athletes are still learning, and it's supernatural for them. That's what they do.
Yeah, the other side of the data coming off of athletes, we see that the individual athletes wants to see all the data collected on themselves as possible, but the other side of that is they're not necessarily so keen for everyone else to know what their data is. And so that has some real serious implications for leagues. And I think, Hans, it was a really smart move with what you did in NFL. You're staying away from biometric data right now, which is, I think that looking forward, that, you know, all leagues are really going to need to, you know, figure that out. And I think that's going to be in combination with, you know, players' unions and things like that. Because the flip side is someone starts being on the tail end of their career. And if the data shows that they're on the tail end of their career and we can't do things like provide some augmentation to compensate, then that could be the shortening of the career. So it's there's so much data out there, and it's a wonderful thing, but it definitely has some other sides to it that aren't necessarily in everyone's best interest to be made public.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I can agree with that 100% because, you know, with every player that we have, you know, do our profiles, you know, it's not their team telling them actually they have to do this. We ask every single one of them. We give them a form. You know, for the Spanish players, it's in Spanish. I explain it to them in Spanish too. And, you know, it's their choice if they want this to be collected. If they don't want it to be collected, it's fine, you know. So, but it is a major issue because this is personal information, right? And the question is, you know, who has access to this and where does it go? So, I mean, I think this is going to be a major issue, you know, going ahead.
It should be a major issue. You're dealing with the intersection of the team's interests, the player/union interest, and the whole issue of when does it rise to sort of like medical data that hospitals and physicians are not allowed to share. But I think on the shortening of a player's career, I think that sabermetrics and advanced analytics are going to spend a lot of time on that issue because you can begin to see the statistical decline relatively easily. And now they're combining that with video so that you can see that if player X takes a shot in this position, he's 60%. But if he steps a foot either way, he's suddenly 45%. And that's really fascinating stuff, which is going to impact. And it's going to impact coaches because the days of a coach saying, this guy's a 50% shooter, just get him the ball. I said, wait a minute, coach. He's a 60% shooter if he shoots it from the left-hand side and gets it in the right place, and he's a 40% shooter over here. So any coach that says, oh, it doesn't matter, you got to feel it in your gut, there's going to be an assistant and an assistant to the assistant and the analytic assistant that's going to tell him he's wrong, and that's going to increasingly affect the way that players are developed, the way they are trained in the majors, so to speak. By that I mean the Big Five college conferences, and then the super majors, which are the professionals. Actually, they're about the same. You know, the joke was back in the day, just to drop a political one here, no one knew who Donald Trump was until he owned the New Jersey Generals of the now defunct American Football League, and he had Herschel Walker. Everyone, and he was on ABC every day, and it was argued that, was it Georgia or Georgia Tech, that Georgia, that was very upset when Herschel left because he didn't give them an opportunity to match, to which they were probably entitled. But leaving that aside about who's professional and who's not, this is a spectacularly interesting group of people discussing a subject about which you're going to read and hear a lot more. And once again, sports is the precursor, because remember, you heard it here first. People are going to tell you that your seatbelt will tell you whether you're going to suffer a heart attack or not, or you are, or the steering wheel you're gripping is going to speak to your oxygen and heartbeat level, and a whole variety of nanotechnology that's going to be based upon the studies that are being done by these leagues and these experts. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, big guy.